leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Kizito. On Spectrum, tonight, stalemate in the East African Parliament elections. Will it finally be broken? On Monday, next week, a meeting will be held in the Attorney General's office to decide on the rules and procedures for electing candidates to represent Uganda in the East African Legislative Assembly in Arusha, Tanzania. This follows a successful injunction by the Democratic Party's legal advisor, Fred Mukasambide, against Uganda's parliament, where he argued that the former election method contravened Article 50 of the Treaty of the Establishment of the East African Community. Mbide also successfully argued that another key rule or procedure of the Parliament of Uganda violates Article 29, Section 1C of the Constitution of Uganda that governs the right to freedom of association, which shall include the freedom to join and to form and join associations, unions, including trade unions, and political and other civic organizations. Now, the other countries have already named their members to this assembly. So tonight on Spectrum, we ask, will the smaller parties finally get members to sit on this regional parliament, and try to examine the problem, why the other countries have members and Uganda doesn't have a member. It's 9 members yet. Our guests tonight, Mr. Kwame Nkrumah, NRM candidate. You're most welcome. Mr. Kwame Rugunda. You're most welcome. It's not a common name, you'll pardon me.
Nkrumah is okay.
I can imagine.
Good evening, listeners.
Well, we are also joined by Honorable Oliver Onera, former NRM woman MP for Bududa.
Good evening.
Now aspiring for the East African Legislative Assembly. You're most welcome, Honorable Oneka.
Thank you. Good evening, listeners.
Let me ask you, Madam Oneka, to give us a background. Why can't Uganda decide on its representation to the EALA? What has caused this delay? Would you like to explain to us a little bit about that?
Actually, I would like to pose that question to those who are in charge.
Right.
Because I am a former member of Parliament. I'm out of Parliament right now.
Yes. And
I am being subjected to the fact that those questions have not been answered, you know. So we as candidates, we want to see somebody in charge of the process, guiding everybody else and letting the country know, so that whoever would like to join the race knows that this is the formula, these are the rules, this is where you go for information. Yeah.
So, do you have information on who's coordinating this? I would like to get some background for some listeners who might not have an idea about this.
Yes, sure. First of all, it's only 2 out of the 5 countries that have elected candidates so far. So that's 40% of East Africa. So Uganda is not an anomaly.
Right.
That's point number 1.
Okay.
Point number 2, like you mentioned, Mukasambide's case is being had at Arusha. It's at the level of first incidents, so you can see that it's been given a lot of priority.
Right.
So what is pending is that ruling, and when that ruling comes out, the rules of procedure will be concluded on the floor at Parliament, and subsequently the voting. So that is what we're waiting for.
Okay, I do have an idea about how many candidates are involved, and before we talk about you individually.
Well, my experience at Parliament now is that almost every day there is a new face joining the race. So I don't think we are able to really put the number, you know, to tell you what the number is.
Yes.
But definitely it is over 20.
Over 20?
Yes.
And eventually they're supposed to choose 9 members?
9 members, yes.
Do you know what the criterion is at the moment? How does one qualify? How does one present themselves?
At the moment, we know that there are 9 slots. Every member country is going to return 9 members. As to how exactly these members are going to be elected is going to depend on those processes that you're hearing about. For example, that appeal that was successfully made by Mukasambide. There is also the pending decision by the East African Court, and also this meeting that you have just mentioned, that I've also come to know of in the Attorney General's office on Monday. So all these processes should give finally a clear guidance on how exactly these 9 members will be selected. I don't know about my colleague here, Kwame, but personally, I'm trying to position myself as best I can so that whatever the outcome is, I am one of those candidates.
All right. And we don't have an idea of what the mishmash is. Would you like to paint some picture about, this legal, the clauses clashing, clauses going one side and clauses going another side?
We can only speculate what will come out of Arusha.
Yes.
So we can look at the possible different scenarios.
Let's look at those.
Scenario number 1, every party in the House is represented. Okay? That means there'll be a candidate for CP, there'll be a candidate for DP, there'll be a candidate for GEMA, for UPC, for FDC, for NRM, for independence. So that's scenario number 1. Scenario number 2, proportions in the House. And that would most likely be NRM has majority, either 6 or 5. Independents have some, and FDC as the largest opposition party has others. So really it's scenarios that just need to be played out. I think we would rather wait for the ruling to come, then we are able to discuss this matter.
Yeah, and that is in as far as parties are concerned.
Yes.
But you have got gender considerations, you have got interest groups that are represented in our parliaments. Here, interest groups, you have got youth, you've got people with disability, you've got the army, you've got workers, and you've got issue of regional balancing. So it's quite a mix.
Okay, maybe you can explain to us, how would an issue of such magnitude be settled in a man's office? Why would you go to the Attorney General's office, sit one afternoon or one morning and resolve it?
Actually, I don't know. I have only learned from here, from your mentioning that there's going to be a meeting in the Attorney General's office. Of course, on all legal issues in our country, the Attorney General is concerned, especially where government is concerned. So I think that's why there's going to be that meeting. I don't even know who will be in the meeting.
Okay.
I would be surprised that a decision would come out of that meeting, primarily because the issue is in
court,
Arusha right now.
In Arusha,
And I recall, I think it was on 3rd April, when the Attorney General went down there to kind of push the matter a little more. So I don't think that this meeting of Monday would come out to the final issue. I think the meeting would probably try to find a way to push Arusha more, such that we can have elections quickly here.
Okay. Where we're coming from, maybe you can give us an idea about what the procedure has been in the past. How have they done it before?
Initially, in the first lot that went to Arusha, it was decided by the NRM and together with the Parliament that there will be 4 women, 4 men, and 1 other, who could be, anybody, either a man or a woman. And I know that as a woman, for us, we wanted to make sure that at least we have 4 women.
Yes.
So that was in the first parliament, and these were elected regionally. You had a man and a woman coming from a region, and these were traditional regions. You had North, Central, you had East and West.
Yes.
So you got a man, a woman, and 1 other, who could fall in any of those categories.
Yes.
Then the following parliament, there was multipartyism in this country. In the initial parliament, we had movement dispensation.
Yes.
Then came multipartyism. And the division was 7 members came from the NRM, from the ruling party. And 2 from the opposition. From the opposition came 2, but from FDC.
Both came from the FDC.
Yeah, Forum for Democratic Change. Both of them. And we had You had 4 men, we had 4 women. How many do we have? Well, now that was the decision. Now you have 7 coming from NRM and 2 from the opposition. Yes. Which 2 came from FDC, from one party. So now we have other issues. You know, you have got this appeal from Mr. Mukasambide, and I'm sure his appeal is an expression of what other parties, the smaller parties, are thinking. They would like also to be represented. So the dynamics have changed. Right. What we shall end up with finally, we are all looking forward to. Yeah. What in your view, what would be the ideal situation? How would it be done?
Ideal is such a relative term, depending on the candidate, on the party one is
exactly.
Yes.
But I think the 2 extremes of the argument. One extreme is the proportion, on proportional basis, in the House, and then the other extreme is each party represented, each gender, each special interest group, etc.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that extreme is also not possible because there are more of those categories than there are slots available.
Exactly.
Because there are only 9 slots.
9 slots. Yes.
So I think the ideal is to meet both ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you do it? I mean, generally, has a large number of people, 70% almost of MPs. They would feel cheated if you had to choose. You know, if a party that has only 1 MP was also given representation.
Yeah. The reason it's in Arusha is because we're trying to figure out how to do it.
Exactly.
How are the other countries doing it?
For instance, Kenya had 5 ODM and 4 PNU. Tanzania, which voted yesterday on 17th, 2 days ago on Tuesday, has majority CC. So each country has its own variations,
right.
You know, depending on their types of political dispensation.
Right. So
actually, at the end of the day, Parliament, you know, it is seen as Parliament
that chooses the rules.
Exactly. The criteria. Yeah, the criteria. Well, they are being all worked out, you know, like behind the kitchen, but they must go to Parliament and be approved by Parliament. So in our situation now, we can only speculate as to what might be the final.
Okay, but we know that basically it's possible for someone to come from outside of Parliament and get elected to the East African Legislative Assembly. You don't have to come from the Parliament. Let's get that clarified.
No, that one, the treaty is clear that the members to the East African Parliament have to come from outside the Parliament. Those that come from Parliament itself are those that go to the Pan-African Parliament. Yeah.
That's in Addis Ababa.
So, this one to East African Legislative Assembly, even you, Mr. Edmond, you are eligible.
Right.
Yeah. So long as you qualify to go to Parliament, to our national Parliament here, you qualify.
All right, that's assuming I had the blood of a politician, which I don't. But let's talk about the criteria. How do you choose? How do they determine? Is the same standards as qualifying for the local parliament?
Yeah.
The national parliament.
Yes.
Are there any other qualifications?
I think that's it.
Well, listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1. Tonight, stalemate in the East African Parliament. Will it finally be broken? 2 out of 5 countries have elected members to this assembly. Uganda is not one of those 2. It's one of the 3 that hasn't chosen theirs. Kenya has, Tanzania has, Rwanda, Burundi.
Actually, Tanzania and Burundi.
Tanzania and Burundi have elected theirs. Kenya has not selected theirs. So we are still waiting. It's a 5-member country block. You two will be able to contribute to this discussion, and I'll read out the numbers when that time comes. So let's talk about the countries that have selected their representatives. What do they do in the meantime? Because they were supposed to inaugurate this assembly, I think, a couple of days ago. What would they be doing in the meantime as they wait for the other 3 countries? Do we know that?
The inauguration is in June.
It's been put in June. So in the meantime, there's an abeyance. There's waiting, basically.
No, it hasn't been put in June. The treaty actually clearly stipulates that the term of service will begin on June 4th.
Yes.
Now, there's currently a sitting in Nairobi.
Yeah. The current parliament is still
going on.
Yeah.
Yes. Until
still
June.
Working.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about your own credentials. Kwame, why do you want to go to this parliament? Talk to us a little bit about yourself.
I want to go to the parliament because I want to serve my country. First of all, I believe it's important for young people to step up into leadership, to get involved in the political process, particularly as we prepare to go to the level of federation. So young people should step up and assert themselves politically in the creation of the federation. That's one. Two, I come from the private sector. I'm an engineer by training, and I've been in the private sector for about 8 years. I also happen to be on a board of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
They've got a National Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Yes, where I'm vice president. Now, the reason I mention that in particular is because the Chamber is the umbrella organization of all private sector companies, private sector entities in the country. Now, the private sector, being the engine of our economy, should essentially similarly get into the front seat of the integration process. Article 7 of our treaty, the East African Community Treaty, states that the integration process should be people-centered and market-driven. So the foot soldiers of the integration process are actually people in the private sector, meaning people in commerce, people in trade, people in industry. Those are the people who move across the borders and understand the challenges of moving from one country to another with different customs regimes, non-tariff barriers, etc. So my background and my understanding of these issues from the private sector, both at a micro level but at a macro level as well, from the Chamber, gives me the necessary credentials to go down there and champion their cause, to be able to advocate for the challenges that they are having as the foot soldiers of the integration process.
Legislators thinking with them, having the mind of a private sector. So when you're passing laws, you have that mindset. They are friendly to the private sector operations.
Yes.
Madam Onera, would you like to talk to us about your own credentials?
Yeah. I am a former Member of Parliament. I have served for 2 terms. During my last term, I was in Parliament for 7th and 8th Parliament.
10 years.
10 years.
Yes.
During my second term of office, I also chaired the Committee of Agriculture for 2 sessions, that is 2 years, 2 consecutive years. I have been in Parliament as an interest group. I've been there as a woman Member of Parliament.
Yes.
I have plenty of experience having been a legislator. During my term of office, I got to get exposed to the issues, the regional issues.
Yes.
I go to attend conferences, retreats, workshops of COMESA, of ASERECA, that is an agricultural, of AGRA. These are international and regional organizations where you have issues where you have national issues, you have regional issues, you have continental issues, and international, global issues where they are discussed. I think I have the experience, the exposure, and the commitment. I have something to take to that legislative assembly.
All right. Well, listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1. Tonight's Stalemate in the East African Parliament elections. Will it finally be broken? Our guests, Mr. Kwame Rugunda, NRM candidate, and Madam Honorable Oliver Oneka, former NRM woman MP for Bududa in Eastern Uganda, also a contestant in the East African Legislative Assembly. We'll be back after this break. Do stay tuned.
When Junior lost his appetite, his mother tried all methods to get him to eat. She tried scary stories.
Eat, Tommy, eat, or the big black elephant will come and eat all your food.
She tried magic.
Tommy, if you eat your food, I will turn this handkerchief into sweets. Look, bumble, bumble, boom, boom.
Then she discovered Apetol multivitamin syrup with lysine.
Mommy, I finished all the food. I am number 1.
Apetol multivitamin with lysine is helping mothers to turn mealtime frustration to a fun moment. Apetol has a great taste and contains lysine, which quickly improves your child's appetite and supports healthy growth. Apetol, help for life.
Let the sunlight in.
Good morning, sunshine of my life. You look happy today.
I am. I came in here and I saw there was a whole pile of washing to do.
But I thought you didn't like doing the washing.
No, I love it. Anything else you need washed?
Sunlight 2-in-1 with added fabric softener. Smells so good, you want to use it again and again.
Let the sunlight in.
Sunlight 2-in-1. Sunlight clean, sunlight fresh.
Sunlight in. Happiness is all around. Let the sunlight in.
John, Mike and I, we go back a bit. We knew John at the beginning, working for someone else. But he was different. He had vision, saw opportunities. He started working towards his goal, opened his own garage, and worked, learning the hard way. His reputation spread. Trust, consistency, quality. Soon people were coming to him from all parts. He made himself and his whole street prosper, and also helped friends, seeing potential in people and helping them on. But John never shouts about all his success. He is just who he is. Special.
So here's to men like John, who make a difference, who enjoy Nile Special, the rich, satisfying taste from the source. Nile Special. You've earned it.
Not for sale to persons under 18.
Accept no substitutes.
Radio 1, FM 90.
Welcome back to Spectrum on Radio. And tonight's Stalemate in the East African Parliament elections. Will it finally be broken? Our guests tonight, Kwame Rugunda, NRM candidate. The surname is a very well-known name in Ugandan politics and diplomacy. Our second guest is Honorable Oliver Onera, former NRM woman MP for Bududa, now contesting for the East African Legislative Assembly slot. There are 9 positions. She was in the 7th and 8th Parliament, and she wants to represent Uganda, to be one of the representatives in the East African Parliament. Let's talk about the East African community. Does it satisfy you the way things are going? Getting back into integration, it broke apart in 1977 after being formed from the 60s. Do you think we're on the right track? Are we moving towards restating it?
I actually believe we're doing quite well. The teams in place at EALA, for instance, the first and second assemblies, have made significant contribution. The East African community as a whole has made a lot of contribution, albeit challenges. Of course, there are still many things that are falling short. But why we want to go there is to consolidate the good work that they've been doing and even take it forward. It's important to note that East African community is the only regional economic bloc on the continent that is aspiring towards political federation.
Yes.
All the others are essentially set up for either economic purposes or developmental purposes. SADC, COMESA, Central African States, ECOWAS, etc. So East African community is particularly distinct in that sense, which is a great thing. It ties in with what we're just discussing on Pan-Africanism, recreation of that direction. And I think East African community is making leaps and bounds.
Is it something that can work? Having a political union?
I actually believe it is. We've made a lot of progress so far with the different protocols in place. If you have, for instance, we have customs union in place.
Yes.
We have common market in place.
Yes.
There's a high-level task force that has been put together to organize monetary union.
Yes.
Essentially, they're doing the macroeconomic harmonization between the countries. All those have been on schedule. Implementation schedules are also similarly there. But the fact that we've had all those on schedule so far shows that there is effort in the right direction. Of course, the next step after monetary union is political federation.
Right, there are 4 pillars basically. You've broken them down very clearly. The customs union, the common market. So 50% is done. We're left with 2. 2012, this year was supposed to have the monetary union, and that you say that's what being worked on. The others have been on schedule.
Yeah, the protocols have been signed. It's now the implementation challenges that we're going through.
Having one currency, one East African currency. We had it before.
Yeah. We had one currency before.
In the past.
I saw it.
Graduating from the rupee. We had the rupee in the past.
Kwame, I'm sure I can only imagine.
I've seen pictures of it as well.
You've seen pictures. I saw it. I touched it.
All right.
Yeah, indeed, the East African community processes are on course. Of course, as my colleague Kwame said here, with plenty of challenges, because as it is now, if you went to if you found any Ugandan and asked them about the East African community issues, really, it's like, what are you talking about?
They don't have a lot of information.
No, the information, they don't have it. So, there is a lot of work we have to do to get our people to appreciate these processes that are going on for the East African community, for the realization of the East Africanness, for Ugandans to think and feel and act as East Africans. Because many of us, if you're asked, onera, where do you come from? Let's say we are in Johannesburg. I would say I come from Bali in Uganda, and maybe not even remember to say I'm from East Africa.
Yes.
I have worked in Tanzania for a year, and in Tanzania you're more likely to find somebody who will tell you, who will introduce himself as, I am an East African from
they have
Tanzania.
A high level of awareness of regionalism.
But coming from Bukoba, it's the other way around.
Subsidiary.
Yes.
Right.
So, indeed, at the high level, the East African community processes are moving. But we need to do a lot to get our peoples, to get the people in Bududa, to get the people in Kampala here, in our city, in our capital, to think and talk and make
and
feel part of East Africa. I have been in conferences here in Uganda where Kenyans have come to participate, Tanzanians have come to participate, and they have said, when we get to the immigration officers, they ask us, for how long are you going to stay here? And
that's true.
And these professors or whoever they are, the businessmen, they say, I am an East African. Why should it be an issue?
I could stay if I like the food. I could stay for good.
Yes. Why should it be an issue for me to tell you how long I'm going to stay?
Right.
And that's not only in Uganda. When I go to Dar es Salaam, I go to Tanzania, I'm asked the same questions.
Right.
I'm sure when you also go to Nairobi,
they'll ask you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in another country the other day, and
so
when I checked my stamp letter, it said not to be employed, gainfully or non-gainfully. And it took me a little bit later.
And yet, the idea of the East African is so that we can have free movement of labor and capital, and have human resource, shared human resource.
Yes.
We would like the businessman here from the National Chamber of Commerce, his people easily moving across borders with their goods and services, but we still, on the ground, we still have those challenges. The people who are to operationalize, to implement at the grassroots,
yes,
are not doing it. So what's the problem? So for me, as I would like to go to EALA and interrogate these issues and highlight the fact that people from people at the borders, you still have small commodities moving from one side of the border to the other, and the people who are carrying them are being harassed. You have a little sugar coming from Kenya. If you go to Malaba and Busia, a lot of women will drown in Malaba River
trying to cross with
a little sugar.
Contraband.
Exactly.
Which should not be contraband.
So the East African community processes are supposed to finally make it easy for people to move across the border. So these are concerns. For me, if I should become a legislator at Arusha, these are the things I want to go with.
All right.
Yeah.
Kwame, I'd like you to talk to us about Pan-Africans, but before you do that, let's talk about the rationale of getting everybody involved. Is in the end, you'll probably have 15% of the people actually getting to move. Some people will stay where they are for a long time. Let's look at, for instance, independence. Not everyone had to know we're going to get independence. Do we need that much awareness? Because some people think it could bog down the whole process, having everyone on board.
Awareness is probably the primary thing that is required. You were just talking about independence right now and reflecting on Pan-Africanism. If you recall, one of Mwalimu Nyerere's main drives was to have independence of all these countries on the same day. While they were agitating for Uhuru independence, they were similarly agitating for for Shirikisho, for integration between the countries. Now, that having been said, let me take a minute to add on to my sister's statement. The first agenda that I want to champion, and I have it there in front of you, is East Africanism. I have a threefold agenda that I want to champion.
Let's talk about East Africanism.
Yes.
From your own perspective.
Yes.
Let's talk about it.
And my agenda is simple. It follows the EAC acronym. E for East Africanism, A for assemblies working together, and C for creativity and innovation. Now, the first agenda there, East Africanism, is extremely, extremely critical, because the only way this integration process can happen is if we have a common identity as a people. The second assembly, for instance, the one that is currently serving, introduced rotational sittings of EALA, which has been a great thing.
They move around.
They move around.
Yes.
But we need to take it a step further. They can't just move around and come to the capital cities. There are about 52 members. Why don't they go sit in Karamoja? Why don't they go sit in Kisumu?
Exactly.
Why don't they go sit in Butare? So we need to think about creative ways in which we can get more people involved. You can imagine if the sitting is in a place like Karamoja. Two important things.
People around will ask about it.
Awareness will easily happen.
Yeah.
Secondly, there'll be a boom in business. So we need to find creative ways in which we can create this East Africanism we're talking about. There are a lot of political and economic policies in place to do so, but we need to think of the more social cultural factors. For instance, music. If Chameleon was to come to the studio and sing a song, we would be dancing to it in Butare tomorrow, or you'd listen to it Kiss FM in Nairobi the next day. Such social cultural factors are really the fabric that hold people together. You recall when Kenya came here for the football game last year, droves of buses came, and that weekend there was a huge boom in business. So we need to think of social cultural factors that cannot be confined by things like policies, but a natural chemistry between the people.
Yes.
That is what we need to use to create East Africanism.
Wow, that's remarkable. That's quite remarkable. Obviously, opening new windows of looking at it. People like Chameleon, when they sing there, so they're already thinking East African because they sing in Swahili and so on.
Yeah,
so they keep in words from other places. You spoke about football, which is a universal kind of it's got a universal appeal, I think. Let's talk about the elections. Do you think elections could be used to spread this awareness, having it direct and adult suffrage, voting the MPs? Some people have said instead of having an electoral college, spread it out.
I know that our speaker, the current speaker of Parliament, is one of the champions of that thought. But I think, as it is now, it will be an enormous task, in my opinion, because I see a member of Parliament, in a small constituency, 3-4 sub-counties, really sweating it out under adult suffrage to go to Parliament here, and a national Parliament, even little municipalities. How about at the national level? I try to think about it like adult suffrage, but how big is the constituency? Is it the whole country voting? Is it everybody, who is of voting age? So you're talking of someone looking for a vote like the president.
So you think it would be illogical to spread out 9 members going across the country?
I don't want to call it illogical, because the thought has already been put out there actually for consideration. But in my opinion, right now, I can't imagine it would be a huge task for these 9 people looking for the vote across the country. I mean, you can equate it to the president looking for his vote. And it has never been easy for presidential candidates here looking for votes.
Kwame, talk to us about there's a man that used to have your name in the past in West Africa, and you talk about things like Pan-Africanism. Some people are beginning to think that if East Africa has a political union, it could be the building block for African coming together as a one nation, like Kwame used to dream.
Actually, I agree with you. I think the fact that East African community has political federation as its ultimate objective, that goes to show the thinking process that was put into the creation of the East African community. And I believe that I recall, I think it was last year when the tripartite summit was here in Munyonyo. COMESA, SADC, and EAC coming together to see how to create a common market with all these 29 countries that it covers. Something like that, and having EAC as a model that has already taken a certain made some steps forward, can easily be used. EAC can easily be used as a model across the continent, and that's why we must work hard to really put it together and put it together well.
Right now we have 5 countries. Some other countries have expressed an interest. DRC, if the DRC came on board, would be connected to two oceans, the Indian and the Atlantic, I believe. And then you have South Sudan, you have Sudan, the generic one, you have Ethiopia, Djibouti, Somalia. So it could be a big building block. Is that something that makes sense, or is it wishful thinking?
No, I think it's something that makes sense. But you had asked me about my namesake, so I just wanted to say something.
Let's see about that.
I actually happened to have met his daughter about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, really?
And I told her, because of your father, Kwame is now an African name. So I introduced myself as Kwame from Uganda.
Right.
Yeah. But in relation to Nkrumah, one of the serious issues, if you recall at Ghana's independence, Nkrumah made a very famous statement that continues to echo now. He said that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is bound up with a total liberation of the African continent. Now, this was said in 1950s, slightly over 50 years ago, about 55 years ago. Then there were the things that happened subsequently that caused the formation of Africa, OAU,
the Organization
and eventually AU, and the forces that played, meaning the guys that wanted independence now, the Unionists at the time, and the guys that wanted the regional setup, what we are going through right now, and the regionalists won. But we need to take stock of how far we've come so far in relation to what Nkrumah was talking about then, and the path that we took with the regionalists and the unionists that lost. How far we've come since then, and what can we do to ensure that we can work harder to come together in a much stronger way, like what we're aspiring towards.
So I think it makes, would you like to comment about that? Some people think, well, there was this argument that Africa should come together as one nation, just like the Big Bang. Some people think we should be, regional blocks coming together, like the meeting that we had in Munyonyo last year, SADC, ECOWAS, and the East African community, and things like that. Does that make sense?
Well, I think it is desirable for us to come together as a continent. It is desirable.
Yes.
But we're already talking about the challenges of East African community, the challenges in the processes. I think we, in my opinion, we should strengthen this East African community, ensure that the processes are brought to, of course, these are processes, they may never come to an end, but that they come to good conclusions, one after another, which satisfy the objectives of having the East African community in the first place. That our people can enjoy those services that the East African community is meant to provide. So I think, as Africa, I would like us to strengthen the blocks, the East African bloc, the SADC, the COMESA, the ECOWAS, strengthen them so that when we get to be a one continent, each bloc is bringing strength, more strength than the weaknesses. That's my opinion.
Well, of course, Richard Sesbera, who's the Secretary General, the new Secretary General of the East African Community, has underlined the fact that this is the only bloc that seeks to be a political union, one country basically. We don't know what it would be called, and that's supposed to happen in 2015. Do you think, first of all, that goal is realistic? The 5 years, the 2015, 3 years from now. What's your assessment?
Going by what's happening, what's on the ground right now, I don't see it happening.
You might lose a year or two?
Yeah, a year or two. Because the common market would like it to work, to be seen to be working, the customs union to be working, and And in my opinion, it looks like maybe some countries are not so eager, to really fast track the political federation, as if they have some holdback. They are a bit too careful.
Let's talk about Tanzania. Tanzania, the feeling there seems to be, I was there recently, they seem to think that in Tanzania the government seems to own the land. I didn't study their things deeply, but they seem to think that in Tanzania the government owns the land. In Kenya, private owners have the titles. Some of them are freehold, some of them are leasehold, and that seems to be a drawback. Can such issues be resolved eventually?
Well, hopefully they will be resolved. I have also been to Tanzania, and I've also gotten that feeling that the Tanzanians are rather worried, like these Kenyans and Ugandans are rushing here to take over land, So I think the Tanzanians would like the issue of land really being addressed and clearly put out there, like no Ugandan is rushing to Tanzania to take land through the East African community processes.
Of course, that Tanzania is a large country.
Huge.
Land, attachment to land is mostly a function of poverty. Some people can make a lot of money using tiny bits of land, using services. But also the coming of South Sudan, which is another large country with a lot of arable farmlands. Would that dissipate that fear, do you think? Would it make them less afraid if they know that, we can have, if someone wanted to steal or take land, they could even go to South Sudan. There's a lot of land. And large companies have been given, venture capital firms have been given large tracts of land in South Sudan.
I'm sure you know the complications of land. Many wars world over, primarily because of land. But land tenure systems, irrespective of the differences, the job of leaders is to lead. So land is just one of the many issues that will need to be addressed. But that having been said, I believe that with correct effort, direction, and really vision in the right direction, these things can be
resolved.
Yes.
All right. Let's hear from the listeners. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. Tonight's stalemate in the East African Parliament elections. Will it finally be broken? You can call in now. Our number is 0414-348-111, 031-226-0390, 031-226-1390. When you call in, please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
Hello?
Spectrum, hello?
Yes, how are you?
Very well, thanks. How are you, sir?
My name is Morrison.
Yes, Morrison.
And I believe the problem.
Spectrum, hello? Good evening, your name? Yes, Linus. Spectrum, hello? Yes, sir.
This is Edmond speaking from Kwame, I'm very happy.
No, all right, let's get back to the studio. Madam Onera.
Thank you very much, listeners. It's very encouraging, to get this participation. We're talking about awareness, so people out there, we do have a certain level of awareness. Mr. Rakakamba, thank you for your comments, and I guess you're spot on. He's talking about moving from talk, harmonization of policies, harmonization of legislation to actions. And these actions, he would like also to see them at the grassroots. He has also referred to people crossing with their little goods. So I cannot agree more with his contribution. And when he's talking about, for example, pulling of energy, he's only mentioning one of those, one of those sectors that should be addressed. Actually, he is expressing urgency. He is tired of harmonization of legislation, of policies. He wants action. As for the relevance of East African Legislative Assembly, actually, it is very relevant. It is one of the organs of the East African community, in that, you're not going to have processes and actions being taken without some kind of legislation. You need a legal framework within which to do all that which you are doing. We are able to sit here and do what we are doing, but we are doing it within a legal framework. We know that we are not offending anybody. So also EALA is there to provide the legal framework within which the East African community can do its work. For example, when they sat here, when EALA was last here in Kampala, they passed a very important piece of legislation which governs the accreditation of students to higher institutions of learning. Like when a Tanzanian comes to Uganda, or there's a Ugandan going to Dar es Salaam, there should be a standardized way of accrediting these people.
Yes.
Not like you're Ugandan, you go to Tanzania, you are in shock, because what they require there is not what you know of at home.
Right.
So that was, a piece of legislation that was done by EALA, addressing those processes. You are
directly relevant to the common.
Exactly. So it is relevant, and I'm only referring to just one bit.
Kwame, thank you. Would you think?
I'll just supplement what my sister was saying. The point that Morrison made is extremely important. He was essentially talking about national priorities versus regional priorities. He just gave Uganda as an example, which has energy as one of its priorities. So each country has different priorities, but we must come together and say, as East Africa, what can be our priorities? Tourism is a classic example that we can really champion together. So Morrison, thank you for that point. Then the one that Linus has raised, my sister answered it very well.
Yes.
And then finally, the point on national ID, that's another of the serious issues. The pension, social security systems of different nations need to be harmonized.
Right.
But it is good that there is interest. We need to turn this interest into substance in order to create our integration, our integration process.
All right, our time is up. But basically, in the past we had the East African Railways, we had the East African Harbors, we had the East African Airlines, Airways, we had the East African, we had the Postal Service, we had the East African Development Bank, which is the only unit that seems to have survived. The others were split. Uganda took the railways, I think. Tanzania took the harbors, Kenya took the airlines. They haven't robust the airline in the end. Do you think such common policies? Kenya is getting power from Ethiopia, which has a huge plan to invest in electricity. Don't you think such things would help us a great deal?
Yeah, sure.
If we have a joint plan, then we have a reason to stay together.
Sure.
All right, well, we have to go. Thank you very much, dear guest, Mr. Kwame Nkrumah, NRM candidate for the East African Legislative Assembly. Kwame Rugunda. I'm sure I'm not the first person to do that.
Might as well add Nkrumah.
All right, and the Honorable Oliver Oneha, former NRM woman MP for Bududa, now aspiring to join the East African Legislative Assembly. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond. To Spectrum. We'll be back tomorrow.
Dad, I'm still in New York. My flight back is delayed.
Oh no, but Kwanjula is tomorrow. Now what about the Nkoko na Matoke for the Bako?
Don't worry, I may be stuck, but my money isn't. I'm at Western Union right now.